This is Gifted Education, A Waste of Talent by Alex Johnson. Before I begin, I would like to provide some context as to what I'm about to speak about. Scattered throughout our nation, there are a multitude of gifted programs, which are best defined as the education of children who have been identified as gifted or talented with approaches of enrichment and acceleration. These gifted programs can be focused on many things, such as assisting athletes in succeeding in their sport, or helping creative students hone their artistic abilities. These programs, however, are often centered upon intellectual achievement. Students, through standardized testing or other forms of recommendation, are noticed to be adept to critical thinking or problem solving, and are then offered spots into these programs. The next few years of their education looks like a small classroom with a very limited number of peers similar to them, with the intention of accentuating the qualities within. However, these programs contain many systematic flaws that result in the opposite. I say academic programs for gifted students are flawed, and children placed in them at an early age struggle when adapting to new environments later in life. The first argument I would like to make is that these programs are far too selective. Only about 6 to 8% of students are admitted to these programs. That's 1 in 11, which is a very small number. This results in many mental and social deficiencies. The first one I would like to talk about is the social disadvantages. Because of the selectiveness, there's a very small group of peers, which then results in a very limited social exposure. They become very used to this limited social life and don't really expect anything more in their future. Additionally, because 5 days a week, the entire school year, they're only around students who contain the same intellectually achieving qualities, they become used to that kind of lifestyle and don't have a very diverse social life. This results in the lack of a create of a social life in their future, and they become used to the exclusivity. Secondly is depression. In a peer-reviewed article by Katja Kassir, a renowned psychologist, she's quoted to say, being labeled as gifted increases the risk of peer stigmatization and can thus lead to emotional distress. This brings me to depression. In a study by Endo Lilleshek, he proved that the average students are 50% healthy and only 12% vulnerable to depression, whereas gifted students are only 32% healthy and 18% vulnerable to depression. While these numbers aren't significantly smaller, this is great data that proves the disadvantages of the selectiveness of gifted education. Secondly, perfectionism. While perfectionism in moderation is a good thing and can push these students to produce adequate work, it does have some defects. For example, when put in a team environment with other students that are not as achieving as them, when they produce work that is not up to their standards or adequate enough for them, they may have emotional outbursts to the work that they produce, and enables them to be not team players and not succeed in team environments, which is a very important thing in the real world. Finally, is stress. As I stated earlier, being labeled as gifted leads to peer stigmatization, and these students feel the need to live up to their title. Additionally, if these students aren't as advantaged intellectually as the other kids in their classes, they might have stress in keeping up with them due to strenuous workloads. While most gifted students find it very easy to keep up with the homework, one that is not as smart as the others may have to put in extra hours and additional brain time, and this could lead to heavy amounts of anxiety. The second argument I'd like to make is that they systematically lack diversity. Only 1 in 4 gifted African American students are noticed and admitted to these programs, which is proven by Sarah Sparks, an editor for Education Weekly. This leads to only 8.4% of gifted education being African American students. This is due to a lack of support in their communities. Black students are 4 times more impoverished than white students are, and this leads to less opportunity to be admitted to these programs due to a lack of publicization of their test scores, even if they do take these tests at all. Not as good teachers that can teach them the things they need to be admitted to these programs. And this not only is a disadvantage to the minorities that are excluded from these programs, but additionally enables the students that are already in these programs to be culturally deprived for the very diverse world that they have to encounter. There are a few possible solutions to the issue at hand. Firstly, I believe they should widen the curriculum. In an article by Byron B. Barrington of the University of Wisconsin, he stated that creativity and leadership are two qualities that are often excluded from gifted education. I think that initially in the admission process, they look for students who have qualities of leadership and creativity. It would solve the issue of social deficiencies as they would be exposed to a more varied group of students, and not only students who focus on school. Also, it would make students, it would enable students to be successful on many fronts, not just intellectually. Secondly, I propose they increase admission. As I stated earlier, only 6 to 8% of students are admitted to these programs. Increasing that to 10 to 12%, while those numbers are still small, it could do great things. Also, in the solution of increasing admission, I think they should reach minority communities more in order to give everyone the same opportunity of gifted education if they're prepared enough for it. The solution of increasing admission does raise the counter-argument that these programs are selective for a reason, and increasing admission too much could defeat the purpose of gifted education as a whole. I refute this in saying that gifted education, while the selectiveness does do good things, it is more harm than good. And increasing admission, with all the data that I've displayed thus far, would solve that issue. In conclusion, these programs are far too selective and undiverse, which leads to a lack of resilience. And two solutions to this problem are expanding curriculum and increasing admission. Here's my sources.
Nice. Thanks, Alex. I've got 2 questions for you, and then we'll be all done. Okay, so for the first one, how did your research question evolve as you moved through the process? Like, did you finish with the same question you started with? How did it change?
I did not finish with the same question I started with. Firstly, I just wanted to see what was the issues with gifted education. And as my research went on, I was introduced to more research that proved the psychological defects of gifted education. And that led to my research question changing from more of like a systematic failure to how does this affect the students kind of failure.
Terrific. And then as a follow-up, how did you use the conclusions or the questions in your evidence to advance your own research? Like, how is it that those sources informed your conclusion?
Okay, I'd say that all my sources are in collaboration with each other. All the sources that I chose to use all had the same conclusion that gifted education is flawed, and while they all varied in proposals of stress, anxiety, depression, selectiveness. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How did the conclusions or questions of others advance your own research?
Yeah, and so that all of that led me to be more curious as to what other problems it causes, and so it advanced my research in me wanting to dig deeper into the problems of gifted education and how it really affects the students.
Terrific.